Okay, Nicholas, we're ready when you are.
Okay, let's wait for Carlos to get back in here. All right, welcome everyone to the regular town council meeting of the Mount Crested Butte Town Council. First order of business is call to order. Tiffany,
Steve,
or roll call, I'm sorry.
so Steve.
Here.
Roman,
Here.
Janet. Here. Dwayne,
Yes.
Michael,
Here.
Alec is absent, Mayor Kempton.
Yes. Next item is approval of agenda. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the agenda we have before us tonight? 1 second. I did. We're still on this. Go ahead, Carlos.
There is one item I would like to amend the agenda. First of all, this particular item, approval of the agenda is something we've added, will be a part of every agenda. Just give the opportunity to make any adjustments to the agenda, which do happen from time to time. And I would like to make a request to amend the agenda to add a consideration of an agreement or a contract with Shred. I can go into the details on what that is. I did send you a brief staff report from Emily and the actual contract itself just an hour ago, so I apologize for that, but I would like the record to reflect that one way or the other. So I would just ask that we amend the agenda for that one item.
So. We have a motion from Roman and a second from Janet to amend the agenda to include a consideration of a shredded contract. And I would propose that we move that to make that 9.3 under business.
Can I ask really quick?
Any further discussion? Okay.
Carlos, does having approval of the agenda on the front side here, to add items, change any procedural stuff from amending the agenda later in the meeting? As we sign
I would ask our attorney that question to be certain.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. You can hear me all right, I guess. Yep. Okay. No, it's common for local governments to have to add or delete items at the last minute on the agenda. And it's a fair question to ask. The only concern that you have to avoid is adding something, for example, that required a public hearing notice or some other code requirement that requires, 5 days or 10 or something in advance. But for contract kinds of administrative things, those are very often added or frankly taken off of the agenda if they're not quite ready. So there's no procedural problem. I know that occasionally people say, well, wait a minute, doesn't the agenda have to be published 24 hours ahead? That's true, but the statute is really clear in saying that what you publish 24 hours ahead is the notice of the meeting, the location, time, date, place, and agenda items if available. And the statute specifically says that to give you the room that sometimes by the time you get to the meeting, there's other stuff. And tonight is one example of that.
All right, any more discussion on that?
Dwayne, Michael.
Yep.
Roman,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Janet. Yes. Mayor Kempton.
Yes. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Citizens may make comments on items not scheduled on the agenda. Per Colorado open meetings law, no council discussion or action will take place until a later date if necessary. You must sign in with the town clerk before speaking. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Do we have anyone here in the audience for public comment?
I forgot a list today.
Okay, so I think, given that we have a number of them, Tiffany, would you please, just call those out?
Yeah, and just everyone knows, I'll give you 3 minutes. I'll give you a 1-minute warning. And then once you get to 0, I'll just say stop. And Tori, you're up first.
All right, thank you. My name is Tori Carroll, and I live on Paradise Road. I've lived there for 10 years. And the bus service that goes down Paradise Road every half an hour is amazing. Like, it's one of my favorite parts about living on Paradise Road. So I was a little bit alarmed with the article in the paper this last week that they're gonna discontinue bus service on Paradise Road and go to using vans. And I think the idea of providing, like, all the streets that don't currently have bus service, I think it's great for them to think about a van system that would service all those streets that, you know, those folks have to walk down to the nearest bus stop, sometimes quite a ways. The article said that they're hoping to triple their capacity the previous years, which I think is a great goal. A little skeptical that 3 vans could handle triple the current capacity that they've done over the last, you know, however many years. I'm sure they've done their homework, but a little bit skeptical about that. I would really like them, Mountain Express, to consider including Paradise Road on their current 3 Seasons loop, because they do plan to keep that. It's pretty close to that loop. I think that would be an easy addition. Just because we absolutely love that bus service. I would also say that, you know, personally, I don't ride the bus in the summer at all. And so in early June, when I see that bus start doing laps around Paradise Road, most of the time it's empty. I don't know if that's necessary. That might be a cost saver for them there. Also during the winter, personally, once again, I can only speak for myself, but I don't ride the bus past 5 or 6 p.m. From Paradise Road. So thanks for your time. I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you.
Okay, Mike Jennings.
Hey, everybody, I'm Mike Jennings. I'm a homeowner at 20 Paradise. I live there full time. I'm here because last Thursday I read the newspaper and I learned that I need to keep better tabs on what's going on up there. I was really blindsided by the fact that the bus routes are getting canceled. We don't want the buses, or we want the buses, we don't want the vans. However you want to describe the public outreach on the topic, I think 2 words that have to be used are insufficient and ineffective. Because everybody on Paradise Road wants the bus. And everybody on Paradise Road was blindsided by the article. So now we know this is happening. And we're gonna work with this council to keep buses on Paradise Road. We don't want the Aspen Jackson minivans. We want the buses. It's a better service for us. Obviously, just like Tori said, if vans want to be considered for folks that are not on the bus route, great, we're all for that. They're gonna increase their budget by like 75%. And they're getting rid of the bus and they're going 3 vans. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Maybe it makes sense to everybody else. I'm not sure. So I'm not going to go into any more details about why I want the buses, and everybody knows why we want the buses. We all feel blindsided that this happened without letting everybody know and giving people a chance to say something about it. So we're letting you know that this is how we feel. I think a lot of people here have gotten emails and letters over the last couple days. So you kind of know where our neighborhood is, where our street is on that. We're not happy or satisfied with the situation. And we're gonna work with you guys to keep the bus on Paradise.
Thank you.
Kelly Jennings. The real short that. I'm gonna read, that's all I say.
My name is Kelly Jennings. I ride the Paradise Road route somewhere around 100 times per year, I estimate, as do everyone in my family. That's 6 of us. So that's 3,600 times in the last 6 years. I'm not here to be against the Mountain Express. I love the bus system. That's why I'm here. But I'm 100% against the cancellation of our bus route. Yes, even with 3 replacement minivans. I would have spoken up on this from the start. Unfortunately, I had no idea, because the whole process was called an expansion, and there was never any public facing mention of cancellation this whole time. I'm gonna list the problems I have with it and then a solution, hopefully. Bus riders on this route had no idea this would be canceled, like I said. Turns out it was an expansion. I've come through the CD News articles, the transit analysis, and the Mount Crescent Butte Master Plan. The cancellation of our bus is not mentioned once. Not until Thursday's article, maybe during the last meeting on the PowerPoint. I wasn't here for that. Well, I get the single household service is expanding to more homes. I get that, the 70 to 100%. We were never told about a cancellation. I think deceptively omitting this information is a lie, like an omission is a lie. So the support that was gathered for the expansion was based on a lie, and that's not fair. We're also being told that this is an improvement. We're being told that our wait times are going to go down by half. My wait time right now is 0, because it's a fixed bus system with a schedule. So I know the time, I go out there, 0 wait. So it's going to be pretty tough to make that half or 2 times as good. Next, the plans have been sold as community positive. Community positive is getting on the bus on a POW day with your neighbors when everyone is stoked and it's standing room only and the kids are there and you're there and everyone's happy. Community negative is replacing this experience with a single group van. My family will fill the whole thing. 2 years ago, in a CB News article, Mr. Herzog said, getting workers and visitors on the bus could preserve the community. If you are in a car, you are in your own little world. But when you get on a bus, you are with people sharing an experience. It's a piece of the puzzle to preserving this place. I couldn't agree more. I just don't know why in 2 years this is no longer important. Community positive is providing safe and routine public transport for adults and especially for our kids. We don't have school buses in Mount CB. Our kids, I have 4, have used the buses extensively to get to work, after school, and to and from the mountain. Community negative is replacing it with a service not intended for kids. Downtimers terms of service state. Our service is not directed to or intended for use by children under the age of 18 due to children privacy and safety concerns. This makes no sense. Here's a solution. Add back these routes. If you're not able to do that, then at least add us to the 3 Seasons loop. It's less than 0.9 miles in addition. Time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Liz Tucker?
Hi, my name is Liz Tucker, and I'm a full-time resident on Paradise Road. Though we are newer full-time residents, we have been using the bus service on Paradise for 8 years. Our concerns around the changes to the on-demand van service encompass several different areas. First, the lack of transparency in the process. While the Mount CB master planning process involved community, we were never asked specifically about removing bus service, only about enhancing existing transportation. The community did not say they wanted to remove bus service and were caught completely off guard by this new plan. The master plan calls for enhancing and improving mobility through intuitive and efficient means. However, the new plan has the highest negative impact on the most local street in town without taking local voice into consideration. We are all supportive of enhanced services to areas that need it. However, changing existing service that meets the needs of locals is extremely short-sighted and not intuitive. Secondly, minors. We have children who are old enough to independently ride the bus to and from Mountaineer Square for school, skiing, base area food, town events, etc. But they're young enough to not have cell phones, nor should they need to have them. The removal of scheduled, safe, reliable, and consistent transportation with known drivers when school buses have also been removed is a major disruption. There's almost no circumstance where I will put our children in a van alone with an unknown driver and possibly other shared passengers on a non-fixed route. This completely changes the way we will be able to allow independence in a town we moved to for this exact reason. It will also increase the number of cars on the road as I have to drive them more frequently. Lastly, capacity and community. The timing of trips to ski with others and accommodations of families and large groups will be difficult with minivans. One of the best parts of our community is connecting on the bus. Sharing stories, experiences, snow conditions on the ride is one of our favorite parts of this town. Vans will remove that completely, along with the ability to easily meet up with others for the day. The assertion that our wait times will be shortened is silly. We currently don't wait. We walk to the curb when we know the bus is coming. We know this is a luxury, but it is a specific reason that many of us chose to live on this specific road. The master plan called for Mount Crested View to partner with Mountain Express to identify target locations that needed enhanced service. Please use your position of influence to represent our voice, your residents, to Mountain Express to restore service to Paradise Road through the Three Seasons route. And please think about implications beyond pickup times and consider the deep impact of families who use these buses daily. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carl,
As usual, she said it better, but I'll give it a shot. It's, I'm Carl Tucker. I live on Paradise as well. I'm supportive of the on-demand service, just not in the way that it's currently being implemented. You know, the reality is the community was not engaged in this process, as far as the plan. And the study that was done and the numbers that are being presented around the Snodgrass route, the Columbine route, include no details related to our street. So from my point of view, that data is flawed. Ultimately, you know, why should the council care about this? I know we have representation with Mountain Express, but in addition to that, from my point of view, Mountain Express is not following the town's guidance right now. They're not following the guidance of the master plan. And they're also not following the guidance and the information that's the results from surveys in the transportation demand management strategy, which specifically outline meeting the demands of unserved areas by expanding with an on-demand, not replacing or removing existing routes. If you look at, I believe it's on page 27, it actually references expanding into Meridian Lake and Washington Gulch. There's no guidance around or even small implication of removing bus services. I'm willing to compromise. I think there's a reasonable offer on the table. Tori mentioned it, others suggested it. I do believe the bus, everything should be paused as far as discussions with downtown until actual community involvement happens. But at a minimum, I think people on our street and other streets would appreciate a different approach of some level of compromise. That compromise could look like if we remove summer traffic that's the lowest, if we reduce the hours in the winter just to when the mountain is open, that would give over 50% of the capacity back to Mountain Express to do what they will. I think that's very reasonable. As Kelly mentioned, it's less than 0.9 miles. And driving it slowly, if you just add our street, takes 2.5 minutes. Not a big request for a street based on the last master plan survey that was done, had the highest percentage of year-round residents in the entire town. So, you know, with that being said, I have asked for details around, you know, why could we do this? I've been told it's not feasible. I've reached out, you know, I've asked multiple times now for details on that. I have not received any details as of yet on, you know, why that's viewed as not feasible by Mountain Express. I think for this to work, we're gonna have to find a compromise. That compromise is not gonna be what is currently being proposed by Mountain Express. I think it's not gonna be maintaining all bus routes, but there is something in the middle that's gonna meet the needs of the community. I would just urge, in closing, I would urge the council to, you know, influence Mountain Express and put a pause on current plans so we can collaborate on something that's constructive for the community going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
is there anyone else here for public comment?
Everybody, good evening.
I won't add too much to what's already been said, because I think people summed it up pretty well. I just wanted to add that I heard a lot about Paradise Road, right along Cinnamon Road 21. I think there's also a lot of new traffic there, if you will. A lot of new families, a lot of kids that are coming of age using the bus. Also a lot of VRBO type traffic from visitors coming. So we visually see a lot of people using our road in order to get down to the bus stop. And I know vans should augment some of that, but I think for some distance of Cinnamon Road, it's really just as convenient to walk down to the bus stop. So it's something to consider. It's not just Paradise. I think there's other roads in the district that are gonna lose some level of convenience or service from that bus route. But the other kind of consideration I wanted to bring up is, you know, we're doing a lot of development up here with looking at Snodgrass and obviously increasing the density of housing and whatnot, and what's the message that we're sending for cutting back on public transport. I think we need to be careful about that and really consider just overall the overreaching message of, hey, you know, we're trying this different approach. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. In fact, I really like it. But I guess I would suggest moving at a slower pace. And maybe one solution would be augmenting the routes and bringing in the vans and perhaps cutting back some of the route frequency. I don't know, I'm just spitballing, but perhaps there's a way to test out the theory a little bit better rather than throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Thank you. All right, anyone else here in person for public comment? All right, how about online via Zoom? Any public comment via Zoom? All right, well, thank you all for the public comment. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda.
Move to approve the consent agenda that includes the July 11th town council meeting minutes, the July June town council meeting minutes, the contract and services with JB Engineering.
We have a motion from Janet and a second from Joanne to approve the consent agenda. Any further discussion? Tiffany, I've got a typo that I'll show you.
Okay.
Let's do it after the fact.
Yep.
All right, again, any further discussion on consent agenda?
Roman,
Yes.
Michael.
Yep.
Steve. Janet. Dwayne. Mayor Kimpton.
Yes. Next item is correspondence. I didn't see any in the packet. Is there any we should know about, Tiffany?
There is none.
Okay. Next item then is community housing plan for Honey Rock Ridge Development located at 33 Marcelina Lane, the villas at Mount Crested Butte. Community Development Coordinator Todd Carroll.
Good evening. J415 Limited Partnership represented by Nathan Sheets here in the room. The general partner, Nathan Sheets, is the new owners of Villas Phase 5. Villas Phase 5 is the property that's above the existing villas. It's on the road that has retaining walls above and below it. I believe everybody knows where this is. Honey Rock Ridge is the name of the development that's going there. And Honey Rock Ridge consists of 17 two-family lots. And Honey Rock Ridge is proposing to phase the development with phase 1 consisting of 4 two-family lots or 8 units. To meet the community housing requirements of Chapter 22, Honey Rock Ridge is proposing to acquire 2 Crest House units, use them during phase 1 construction, and then deed restrict them. I have more details in the staff report that I know y'all read in the packet. Also in the packet is the proposed plan by Honey Rock Ridge. I would like to say I thought it was very well written. With that out there. Also in the packet, we did have this reviewed by Andy Cadlick, who's in the room, the executive director for the Gunnison Valley Regional Housing Fund. I know he's here to provide comment. Or answer questions. Honey Rock Ridge is, Nathan Sheets is here to answer any questions, and I see Mason Schuber, who the person that authored the document is, here via Zoom. And with that, back to you.
Questions for staff? So let's start with questions for staff first.
Wait for the applicant.
Okay.
Please step up. It looks like, well, this. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Nathan Sheets and I'm the general partner for Honey Rock Ridge. We've been coming up here to Crestview since 2002 with our family. So all my kids have been raised here learning to ski and fish. And so we're very excited to get to be a part of the community next back.
One question, you've identified 2 places in Crest House that you guys, I think, believe would be a fair swap out versus having to commit one of these 4 units to leadership of housing. Have you looked and identified other target properties that you could acquire versus Crest House? And are you open to the consideration of other units versus
Yes, Mason, who can type in also, if he has any comments, you know, obviously, when real estate's on the market, it's a dynamic and moving opportunity. And so, you know, we've looked at other units that kind of have fallen through because people put them under contract. There was actually something down in CB South that had gone under contract, but it's now come back. And it's that contract fell through. And so I think that with the dynamics of a real estate market, as opportunities come up, and that's actually one of the things that we were curious about because of the dynamic nature. I mean, if we have a plan in place, but all of a sudden we go to execute and the market has taken those off, you know, consideration, do we need to come back to city council, you know, to have that whole plan approved again? Or is that something, you know, within the guidelines of understanding what the objectives and goals are that we have latitude to kind of plug and play as we're kind of executing? So the answer is yes. I know that we had considered a couple other units, but we were concerned with some deed restrictions that were placed into the HOA previously. And so we kind of took those off the table and replaced them with these other 2 units. So I think, you know, we're open to a lot of different considerations. We, you know, we want to do this beyond, you know, writing a check, because housing is such a critical need, you know, here for the community. And just having money, you know, banking doesn't do anything to help provide things for people that have great need. Mason, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you summed it up well. One thing I would add is I agree. Yes, there have been other properties that we have considered. We have eventually landed on these, and part of that reason is within the requirement, there is a like for like sort of requirement to what we're building, and so there isn't a lot of inventory in the higher bedroom range, and so the options on the table are definitely limited. And so I think when we look at unit count and room count, those are all considerations in the properties that we've identified, and the fact that these are on the market and available now, it would seem to be really good timing.
I'm glad you guys are open to that versus being moved, which is usually the easiest path. One of the reasons I asked there is, and Nathan, speaking to what you were talking about, some of the specific needs that need to be met. As you guys probably read, exhibit A in the packet was from Andy Tyler, he's the executive director from GPRHA. And he pointed out a few things diligently with the numbers that we pulled together, with the comparison of what an in lieu of looked like versus committing one of the units that would be built in your, what would be considered, I think, higher end opportunities. And the number of requirements, and then also that financial disparity. In his exhibit, he identified $373,154 savings to the developer that going with the Crest House option versus one of the built units or identifying other acquisition opportunities. And so, and I believe we're short a little bit on the room requirements, but it does allow the town council for our charter to make adjustments and intentions to that. So the reason I'm asking about that is I'm wondering if there's a conversation to be had relative that maybe it folds Andy in and the town staff, or maybe it starts with the housing authority where they're able to also identify opportunities in the market, opportunities that may be coming up. And see if there's a way to get to a little bit of a closer balance with meeting the actual inclusionary zoning requirements, as well as sort of finding an apple to apple comparison. I haven't spent a lot of time in Crest House, but I've spent a ton of time right outside of it. You know, it seems like with a little bit more research, we might be able to come up with a better solution than those 2 units.
Yeah, I think it's, timing is a consideration just in terms of what is available and coming and going off the market, for instance, there's a 3-bedroom up on CB South, the one that we mentioned previously, that we thought would be great, we went into contract and, it's come back. So, we're flexible, to be able to do this, and want to come up with a solution towards providing housing for people as soon as we can versus constructing something. And part of the reason why we did go the route that we did, because the area that we were going to be able to have the housing that we would do on site, that is actually needed for the road to be able to access the lower lots. And so we would not be able to build that goal way later, in the development. And so again, just trying to get something on the books now that will help the community and help satisfy the requirements that we have. That's our desire.
So Dwayne and Roman.
I have a question for staff. And what is the, I hear Nathan saying they're looking at places in CB South. Do we allow for, some place for them to do this outside of town? To provide, to buy housing outside of town?
So I would say the simple answer is yes, that the chapter 22 has some specifics to it with numbers. And then there's a part in there that says the town council can consider if the town council find it meets the goals and objectives of chapter 22. So if you did not find CB South met that, then the answer would be no. But it gives you guys the authority to look at the whole plan and the needs of Mount Crested Butte and community housing and make those decisions.
So we have a future agenda item here to clarify chapter 22. Is that what, because to me, it sounds like there's a question that needs to be answered before he can.
No, I think it's been answered. I mean, what Todd said is that the council can authorize that outside of our town.
I know, I understand that we can do that, but do we want to do that is the question that I have.
Well, I think that's before us tonight.
Well, then as long as we're gonna wade into it, let's wade into it. I'm, not real enthusiastic about, having, the housing in CB South when it's, a requirement of a building permit in Mount Crested Butte.
And I can say the proposal that's on the table today is not for CB South. It's
But
for,
I know that, I'm just saying, but that you're even considering, because, so that brought up the question that now
Right,
we have to answer.
and it was more about the like for like that we were trying to.
Right, I got that.
Okay.
I got that. So,
Well, to Dwayne and Steve's point, any perceived loss of apples to apples. We can strive to make up in ways, whatever that is, but
Todd, I have a question for you. Do you have an opinion of the letter in our packet? From Andy, as far as his calculation and his finding?
Oh, I think that the numbers look very accurate. I think they match. I think all our numbers match the numbers I have in my staff report, Andy's staff comments, and with the Honey Rock Ridge staff report, you know, my opinion is, you know, if you can look at it so many different ways. For one is per inclusionary zoning and community housing or employee housing mitigation, the total number of units required is 1.45. So you do those numbers, you know, then they're supposed to be like for like, so bedroom counts, they're proposing 4 bedroom units, so there's 2 units they're proposing instead of 1.45. The bedrooms aren't quite the same, they do meet the minimum square footage requirements. I mean, the locations seem to be pretty good, I haven't been in those, I just looked at the pictures on the MLS website, which I don't need to go into there, so. If you look at it also with, if they went into payment in lieu route, I think the numbers are the round number 870,000. Those units, if they bought them, I mean, if for whatever listed, it looked like over $1 million. If they do indeed, after a year, sell them for what they could sell them for, no guarantee, right, that they could sell them for that price to the qualified people. Then they could get the reimbursed for numbers 500 or 600 that's in his report. And so if you want to buy the money numbers, you know, you may not, you know, it's a different way to, I guess, see if it balances the needs. But I think the big thing is the 870. And I think the town council, well, I know when Woodward's, I know there's a lot of people that would like to get the units sooner than later than just getting the money, so I think that's the big draw to this consideration.
Well, I think it's a creative option and it satisfies the need you have and perhaps a future need that we have. Because in second consideration of the calculation, would you be interested in gifting one of these units back to the town to be deed restricted, and then that value satisfies the remainder of your calculated obligation?
Are you saying immediately or?
No, when you're done
Oh.
building and instead of selling both of them, when you're no longer needing them, you sell one of them and one becomes the property of the town, and that offset value satisfies the calculation.
Again, I think that we're very open to a lot of different considerations and not coming here with a hard and fast, it's our way, it's got to be done. So, in conversation, if it's something that's good for the town, and it works for us, then I wouldn't want to just make a commitment right here. You know, us going back and talking, and looking at it, things like that, but you know, I like to shoot from the hip, but it sounds like it's something that we need to do.
Yeah, you can put it in your consideration bag, that'd be great. I don't know if you feel about it. Once it's fairly common. Of course.
This is to the council, so, I guess that side there too. Ron said it's creative way, it's also an easier, convenient, and simple way to fill the obligation. As you mentioned, you know, building that community housing unit where you would on one of your buildings probably get built for one, right? So, but what I'd like to ask the council is we look at housing for workers at that affordable area, and you know, that's at 100% AMI or below 80% in the states or below. And in my time with something on the board of GPR and Kelly, housing fund, there's that group, but there's also that group that's just above there. It's not kind of in that millionaire range, right? It's just above that 100% AMI. That's really difficult for them to find housing, right? You know, they might be 150% something like that. And that's not hard to do now with Wendy's and everything else like that. I mean, that's not hard to hit that area. And that's a very underserved population for housing. And so looking at these two, I'm seeing that these are two of the more affordable condominiums available in Mount Crestview right now. I mean, you have this kind of $500,000 range. And then they go up to 900, right? Which that portion is just above the affordable housing mix. Can't afford that 900, but they can maybe make the 400, 500 work. And so we're taking those away from possibly those people if we do this. In addition to that, we're actually kind of the goal, I would say the spirit of chapter 22 there is to increase housing for employees and make that more affordable. And to increase that, we have to build that. So I'm kind of, this is creative and it gets people in there, but we could actually net out a couple more if we require them to build. That makes sense, because this way we're taking two that's possibly available for that underserved area. Taking those away from them. Whereas we could keep those available for them and still get affordable housing via the requirement.
Did you have the option to pay it with
They do have the option, I understand that, yeah.
right?
Well, I was, seeking some clarification on your position. What I heard was your preference would be, instead of allowing, them to buy existing units, you would prefer them to build new units.
Very more inventory, yes.
Okay.
Would you support consolidating those two units into one 3 or 4 bedroom unit that's an acquisition on the open market? That would then not be taking the lower price inventory from the market. Instead of buying 2 Crest House units, they buy a 3-bedroom condo in Kitchener or something where, you know, you're meeting, it seems like, oh, you're not doing 2 units, but you're gonna get the same amount of heads. You support something like that.
Yeah, I mean, because what I support that, I think if the other options can move, then yes, but what I'd really like to see is more physical structures. To put these people in without taking something away from somebody else who could probably, you know, afford this, that kind of in that range. You know, if this came to us and they said, we're buying 2 plaza units at $800,000, well out of the reach of 140, 150% of my person, I'm probably go with that, right? But because we're delving into the bottom half of the free market of what condos are going for around here, strikes me that we're probably taking some away from some potential free market buyers who just don't qualify for the affordable housing component, but obviously aren't too, you know, millionaires or something like that. My thoughts, I was just asking you guys if that makes sense to you, and
No,
I'm perfectly fine with whatever we want to do as a.
I definitely understand your point.
I think that, you know, the part that's, the challenge, and I agree with what you're actually saying, is what takes priority in the consideration set? Is it numbers of beds, numbers of doors, is it the money, you know, and so, again, it's kind of a moving target a little bit, and so our ability to start this project is reliant upon us being able to figure this out. You know, we can't get our building permits until this box is checked. And so we're, you know, if this continues to drag out, it starts to put the entire project, at some level of jeopardy. I mean, this is a very challenging, location. The big ugly blight wall there that we all love to look at. I live right across the street. And I look up at that thing all the time. And so, but this conversation, this decision is a dynamic, conversation that could go on for a period of time. Yet our ability to move forward is tied directly to this decision tonight.
Go ahead. I was just gonna say, I agree with you. I think part of that though is that it doesn't quite fit all the boxes. And so I think that does then open it up to some discussion about how we get
Right, I would like
to that agreement.
prioritizing, like what takes precedence in that decision matrix. So trying to identify a property.
Yep, and I think that's a fair question, and hopefully when we make another round here, counselors can weigh in on that. I'll say just for me personally, it's pretty close. That money gap that's been identified is a little concerning to me. But I think we're pretty close. It's like your idea. And again, I know that's not something you can answer tonight, and I don't know if that would change your mind. Roman's proposal, but I just wanted to give you some feedback on that.
Yeah, so you posed a fair question. What's the priorities of that you count? Is it, pillows, square footage? Apparently, one of the considerations is value of that individual unit it's getting taken away from. So you might maybe offer a little bit, and this might be pushed to the next meeting, we can get more information on what's out there. If you're 4 to 6 units that fit your comfort level of displacement. Oh, I don't want to displace somebody with a express house unit, but you're fine with this other unit over here. So giving them a little bit more direction on maybe what to look for. And it sounds like they do need to discuss some things with amongst themselves about what they're comfortable in and trying to offer back to make up that calculation gap. So
$800,000 3-bedroom down in CB South. That's kind of out of that spectrum that you did reference. But again, it starts to be outside of kind of where we had proposed, today. But again, this the challenge of the dynamics of the real estate market.
Jane.
Yeah, I get where Michael's coming from. I guess my concern is if we don't move forward with this proposal, they're gonna come back with us and payment in lieu. And I don't think that's the option we want at all.
Agreed, and I was actually gonna mention that we all have to consider this against the backdrop of payment in lieu. So I just reiterate, maybe a little closer than we are right now. However that shakes out.
I do have a comment on that. In terms of the calculations, up until this point, because we haven't set before you guys before and had this conversation, really the only information that we've been working with is this chapter 22, and the actual calculations that are required within chapter 22 specify the number of units. And there is the room requirement, which was added to this proposal, was from language that says that like for like language with what we're building. And so I think it's fair that we do speak to that. But in terms of the unit requirement, we are exceeding substantially the 1.45. We're providing 2 in this proposal. And it's also worth noting that there's 2 categories of housing: the employee housing mitigation, category 1, and also the inclusionary zoning, category 2. The restriction on resale value or resale price for the category 1 housing is at 80% AMI restriction. And so basically what you're doing there is you're just giving an allowance for a mortgage and backing into what that sale price would be. Our unit requirement and room requirement for the inclusionary 1, which is more detrimental on the resale side, is only 0.25 units. But our proposal is allocating an entire 1 unit to that employee, the employee housing mitigation category 1. And so in terms of the calculations and what the requirements are within chapter 22, I think we would actually be in excess in this phase one and what we're proposing. And it's, again, this is phase one. There are phase two and phase three. And as Nathan mentioned, this is a permanent requirement where we've kind of had this to work with up until this point. And we feel this proposal not only meets, but does in a way exceed what the written requirements are. And so I just wanted to add that.
We got a smart one on our team.
Before I ask a question, I do want to temper your sense of urgency with the fact that this is the first time we're seeing you, and I get that you're trying to move on this, but understand that that's, yeah.
And our reputation in the past, bureaucracy in the valley, that's I understand. And so it's easy to set those expectations early, but.
Is there, this is for you and maybe Andy, can a higher AMI level be associated with deed restriction, a higher limitation on it?
Oh. Rephrase that question.
Is there a limitation on AMI of who can purchase this unit, or is it more of the base that we're talking about with the 80%?
So what? The inclusionary zoning is for a category 2 up to 120, and then the employee housing mitigation or community housing is for the category 1 or the 80%. I'm not sure if that's answering your question. When they looked at this and they did their proposal, they came up with one unit would be meet the needs for a category 1 and the other unit category 2. And those are, it gets a little confusing reading that to figure out when if you have 2 units, should they both be category 1, both be category 2, or kind of go to the, try to meet the inclusionary zoning for the employee housing mitigation. So I'm not sure how to.
Let me see if I can repackage this.
Yeah.
So is the window for one of those units 80 to 120, but who can purchase that unit?
Category 1 mitigation is 80% or less. Inclusionary zoning is 120, 80 to 1.
And so in part of this process, can we modify the ladder to include a higher AMI level to allay some of the concerns that Michael has?
Well,
Or can we write our own deed restriction for that?
well, I think you are open to do that. I think I get the impression that if you went from 120 to 160, then the resale value, say from 380, would go up to maybe what it is now, the open market rate. So I'm not sure if that goes to the needs there.
And it's not in line with the code. So that's what gives me the pause.
Can you clarify that last one?
Well, again, so they're meeting the needs for employee housing mitigation, which is 80% or less. That's the classification those have to fall in. Inclusionary falls under 120. And so if we take that outside of those ranges, then we're not following our own code. I understand what we're trying to achieve, and maybe there's avenues in the code to get there, but that's my initial thought on that question.
As Nancy pointed out, one only on the 1.25 on the employee side, inclusionary zoning is the other 1.2. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of. It seems like there has to be some play within that. There has to be some play within that because realistically, in lieu of this, going to be a path that would be an option if there's no way we could acquire 0.25 of you, right?
Well, that's you pay for that fraction, but I think I'm thinking out loud as well with this. I mean, the community housing plan was ultimately approved by the town council. And maybe, Jerry's listening attentively here, maybe he and I trading text on this because a lot of these questions are arising. Maybe that latitude is built in as you are the approving body of the of the plan, and you approve that plan with slightly altered income requirements and income restrictions, because you would ultimately approve that deed restriction as well. But I don't know, Jerry, put you on the spot, so to speak. If I'm out of line or better answer the question.
Sure. I think there's a little room because, you know, when you're outside of the build on site arena, which is the main social priority, right? As I think it was Michael mentioned, that's the main goal, right, of the policy. The in lieu and offsite are alternatives that are kind of by their own terms less preferred. But I take a little comfort in the code section 22.6C that after you've done whatever action you've taken, town manager certifies the approval with conditions or denial. And that's certifying whatever it is planning commission, you know, said yes to if it was their decision, or you said yes to if it's your decision, which it is tonight. So that gives me some comfort in saying, yeah, I think you can build conditions into an approval. The caveat to that is kind of what Carlos had to say, which is I don't think those conditions can end up rewriting the code. And there's, you know, as usual, anytime you have a code like this with different alternatives and a little bit of language for conditions, in hindsight, you go, okay, it'd be great if the code actually said the scope of what those conditions could be. And it doesn't. And, you know, we do our best. But I think there's a little room. What I'm hearing, I guess, is, if I'm not mistaken, that the applicant here has gotten the benefit of a fair amount of comment around the room and likely will be given the opportunity to sharpen their pencil on this plan. And there's likely, again, some staff interaction that can happen between now and when they bring maybe a revised plan back. I don't hear that there's going to be some motion tonight to approve with conditions or deny. But the conversations happen tonight maybe tells them the kind of latitude that council's comfortable with. And I think there is a little room when it says approval with conditions. It's got to mean something, doesn't it? You know, the condition might be, okay, yes, in lieu, but they have to be a little closer in lieu, but let's pump up the bedroom count. Those kinds of things I think are fair, especially when you're in the, did I say in lieu? I meant alternate or offsite, but especially where you're the in lieu and offsite arena condition, that I think lends themselves, those two alternatives lend themselves to imposing conditions, because either one of those doesn't accomplish the main policy goal that Michael mentioned that I thought was dead on. So, you know, it allows you to get outside of that main policy goal. But if you do that, those are less preferred, and those alternatives need to be built a little better. Sorry for taking so long, but I've been kind of collecting thoughts as you went along.
You see, this proposal, or not this proposal, it's a little unusual, because a lot of times when, or it's typical when somebody comes to get a building permit for a lot that's already platted, that it's the fractional part, so they almost always do payment in lieu. And then they're doing 4 building permits, so that's what this brings us up. And so I think a lot of times this process of kind of going back and forth with the community housing plan is done during a subdivision or a new PUD or a lot longer proposal. And so I know they're really hoping to get building permits soon, so they kind of want to expedite this, I believe, you know, to get make the town council happy and come up with a community housing plan. But I'm saying that that's part of it, is just reiterate that it's a little unusual because it's just part of a building permit, not a bigger land use proposal. Understood.
Really quick, can we touch on the HOA component of this? As Andy brings up in his exhibit A, it's probably crucial to give at least somewhat assessment of the HOA, as we've seen spiraling out of control. HOA costs don't really help somebody at 60% AMI in a place when their costs can go 10-15% every year over the course of 5 years. In here to the current rate for 70 a month, proposed Honey Rock Ridge plans to use the pennies 500 as an allowance for proposal. Then there's also an estimated $25,000 to $50,000 per unit special assessment that's anticipated coming up. It would seem that if those units were acquired and the applicant covered the special assessment upgrade costs, as well as, I'd love to hear the details on the amount that, if those special assessment costs were tied in, it's not gonna leave a homeowner on the hook for some major project they're not gonna be able to handle. It starts to close the 300,000+ gap that we have in, from the inclusionary. So to me, that seems like it might be a reasonable path, and it gets units much quicker than the build. Could you explain what's the mechanism in the $500 allowance? What does that look like?
It's a Mason question.
Mason?
Yeah, based on my understanding of the guidelines, the allowance is to account for things such as special assessments, HOA dues. It's a deduction from the AMI percentage divided by 12 to get your monthly rate. Then you take out that allowance, and then you're left with what is acceptable to be allocated towards a mortgage payment at certain terms. That the $500 allowance was calculated based upon the $470 a month current HOA dues plus buffer. You mentioned the special assessment. I think that's another thing that obviously special assessment, it's hard to predict what that will be. And so Todd gathered that they're expected to be 25 to 50. And I think that would be a fine condition to add that at the time of deed restriction, right? These numbers are important to note preliminary. They are how they sit today. At the time of deed restriction, that's when the guidelines require that the pricing be determined. And so if there's a reasonable expectation that there should be a higher allowance because of HOA dues plus any special assessments that might be applicable, then we would factor that into the calculation. Hopefully that was clear. Happy to clarify.
Can I clarify real quick? With that, could there be, because these, what year was the building built, Carlos and Andy? It's on. Yeah.
Chris House,
Yeah.
give me a second.
Is it about to have its 50-year anniversary next year?
1969.
69 according.
Yeah.
Mason said 69.
And who's the current HOA management company?
It's Toad.
One thing at a time, then. Would you consider a cap on special assessments for a period of time, 3 to 5 years, based on the age of that building? And we put a cap on it at say 75,000 per unit, that's 150, closes the gap, you're still at 200K roughly versus that discrepancy, and then it protects these homeowners from the surprises that come up. A good example, the building directly next door, so for 6 weeks negated snow removal on that building. There's been a mold outbreak in some of those units, installed a deed restricted sale and a move-in, somebody who's supposed to be on May 15th, but we maybe just got in yesterday. So they bore the brunt of what was a lack of removal. It was being called in by a lot of people, not just the residents there, because of concern for safety with public walk and whatnot. It was 100% neglected, lots of excuses. I've seen the email chains between Thomas and with some people that live on that top floor. So we've seen some blatantly negligent behavior from property management. And so that's incredibly concerning that a person would be locked into that, would have what would be considered poor management and a lack of essential maintenance. So all the deferred maintenance onto the properties traditionally adds up and turns into something like a roof leaking and bubbles forming in people's walls, So my concern is that people are going to buy this, move in, and then 2 years later, all of a sudden they're replacing all the drywall in the ceiling. They've got black mold because there's no snow removal. We could go on for days. So my biggest concern here is just if these places were acquired in place of something else, that there were some protections in place for the homeowners, there's going to be some surprises. And so I'm wondering where you're, without holding each other to numbers tonight, because I think this is something where we can take a couple weeks, assess and then continue the conversation, but maybe take it to your team and think, hey, is there an opportunity? I can sit in your shoes and think, wow, I don't want to take that gamble because I don't know what's in those walls either. right? Of course. So that's why I just want to throw it out there as a consideration. I like where Roman was at with figuring out something creative with a buyback or, some opportunity like that. So, I'm kind of just building off of that and a creative way that we can get to a finish line here, get houses quickly and sort of, I think, meet the concerns of the other houses too. So, off the surface level, it's that it is, would there be a consideration for any timeline coverage of special assessment to a capital amount?
When you start to look at it from the totality, of the life of those students and not knowing, there are so many factors that play into that. And if we're starting to edge right up to the actual in lieu, monies, then there's far less liability to just make an in lieu payment and be done with it, and to not have that long-term unknown liability that's now on me. When all of those things are just as out of my control as they are, for some homeowner. So it's.
Yeah. I understand that. That was your one more thing, I forgot what I was thinking.
So it seems like we're close as far as what we're hoping to see. I think, and spirit is about
Thank you.
some obvious things, and then these guys need to be some thoughts back there too. I had in along with your thought is sort of where I'm about to come from, but the question for staff is kind of how we manage what we already have, and I'll post this slide. So if and I'd like to point out, you're also not considering the several years of rent that you pay for your staff that some of the years while they're being built. That is also.
Yeah, we have a lot of. Costs there.
If let's say this proposal goes forward, they're on the hook for a special assessment, should it happen. And with Pitchfork is a great example of a dues outpacing, the 3% a year, et cetera. We can do our own in-house calculations of what the appropriate dues increase could or should be for someone buying those units. And anticipated over 5 or however many years, they put money in escrow to be closing that gap for those people. And instead of putting the deed restriction on one of those places and giving it back to town, they just give it back to us free market, and we manage it as a deed restricted unit like we do with Elk Run, Oak Ridge. So, no, like my idea earlier about coming up with the difference by giving it back, but not putting the deed restriction on it, because we would manage it as a deed restricted unit, but we could sort of do whatever we want with it, just like we do with that other. So we could build in that 140% level and work within those rules, because it's not technically going to be a deed restricted unit, but we in good faith manage that way. So this is what we're doing with our other units. Michael?
So Steve's one thing coming to, 10 minutes, 7 years, and we're not
One really good time.
Yeah.
Experience.
But you're talking about HOA fee increases, you're talking about special assessments, you're talking about a building that's over 50 years old. And then we put someone with an 8% AMI in there, 3 years down the road, 4 years down the road, whatever. When everything's done and there's no more money coming in, and then paying another $40,000 assessment. That's what I'm worried about, one, but if we stick to what the point of chapter 22 is to increase housing in Mount Crested View, building new housing for employee mitigation, or the employee mitigation aspect of this, then they are getting a new house where they probably don't have to worry about a special assessment or black mold or new drywall, things like that. That's why my first preference by a mile is to build something new. So we're increasing the level of inventory here in Mount Crescent View. And I'm shocked that many of you are advocating for this because a lot of you are always advocating to build and increase inventory anyways. And so granted, this is creative, but every meeting we talk about affordable housing and increasing supply, increasing inventory. We're actually decreasing here in this list.
But that's on us because we need to be in control of that because they're just gonna write a check to us and not.
Understood, I'm telling you what my first preference is.
Oh, me too. I'm
Yeah.
100% on board, but it's either trying
But
to
it doesn't sound
figure
like, it
this
sounds
out.
like you've already.
No,
had that
it's either
thought.
try to figure this out or get a check and then it's still back on us to do something we haven't been doing.
I haven't heard anybody besides Jerry say that my first priority is probably the best way to go. Everybody's already bought into this and it's worked.
But I'm guessing they're not going to build housing, they're just going to give us a check.
We attempted to acquire a 2 acre lot that we were gonna go and build affordable housing, like 15 units, was kind of our plan. And so they gave us a price and we signed it and we were good to go. And then last minute they came back and like, yeah, we're not gonna sell it. We might need it for negotiating down the road for one of our projects. So that is the direction that we were heading.
Yeah.
And, you know, and we talked with Todd and Carlos about, you know, North Village and other land that you guys have around here to be able to go in and do that. So again, those are options that we have pursued and vetted out, that just, again, real estate market.
Yeah. And a little bit of context there as well. This is, as we mentioned, the first phase of 3, and this is also the smallest phase of 3, and thus the requirement with this first phase is the smallest. And so it's a little bit, it becomes cost prohibitive for us to acquire land. Obviously, that's a very expensive thing to do in Mount Crescent Butte, and then build. Also with the timeline, that was also our preferred option in the beginning when it was either an offsite solution or payment in lieu. And so I think agree with you on that would be preferred, but it is at this point in the project more prohibitive than potentially down the line.
Michael. On your point, do you think,
Right after speak. I'm sorry, yeah. Sorry, got lots of hands. So
really quick, I'll keep it less than 9 minutes. If, would you prefer to see new property, a new unit built outside of town versus the acquisition and creating deed restricted inventory in town? I'm trying to weigh your priorities.
Yes, because and I'm sure Andy probably has it here, but you know, the latest housing deficit, right, is what, 800 units?
900 something.
Yeah, so, you know, if it's here, if it's in Meridian Lake, if it's in Sea South, if it's in Riverland, whatnot, but at least we're knocking one unit off that.
And I'm sorry, Wayne, Janet was next, so Janet, then Wayne. I know, I'm trying to correct my mistake.
I've been concerned about these particular units because of the quality of the units, the age and the mentions of, assessments that are gonna be coming up on these places. And I think that not necessarily in my best interest. I actually, the clarification I was looking for, I thought about that's
Well, just to sort of recap for me, so it sounds like the proposal is over and above the units required. It's fewer bedrooms than required, and maybe sort of an open question on the like kind aspect of it. It's kind of iffy on the like kind.
Well, you wanna,
Yeah, well, I think the like for like a lot of times talks about the bedrooms, size and bedroom count, if I remember that in the code. So I think the like for like is that there is a part in the other code also that they're supposed to resemble
Right.
something within 5 years.
Yeah.
But
And so that's actually the part that I was drilling down on, so that's not quite like kind of meant by that second measurement.
Yeah, I would, inclusionary zoning is 15% of the development shall be deed restricted. And in the like for like comes back of, within a development, 15% of those units should be restricted. As to not be exclusionary of someone being able, like an exclusive neighborhood, that's kind of the purpose of inclusionary zoning. And so in that case, I think like for like is, supposed to be similar units within that development. So I think the trade-off here is, well, we're giving you more than you're required to, otherwise would you consider that a trade-off?
Yep, and that's what I was trying to do.
Yeah.
Well. It's a 4-unit complex, right? Or is it 1 unit?
It would be a.
Wait,
There are 2 units.
Yeah,
Oh,
but
phase one is,
it's
or 8 units.
8 units. Do you know how many of them have been renovated? I know at least 1 or 2.
Are you talking about?
Crest House.
I honestly, I don't know. I don't even know. My earlier statement, I think we were referring to what we were building.
Does anyone know how many units Crest House is?
I believe it's 8 units,
Because,
and I don't know the renovation.
I'm pretty sure, I know one definitely that's nearing completion and one is close. Or one had been renovated. Your previous proposal for 3 seasons was to rehab the units that you were gonna be purchasing. We didn't talk about these, do you know what state of state they are? Is there carpet in the bathroom, Yes. Is there? There's carpet everywhere. And so. I mean, we keep going down this road and, we're, I think where we're coming is to the end is painted in blue, because to bring these things current, to make that calculation whole with gifting the thing back and the assessment. I mean, maybe these units should aren't the units. So. I've been trying to do some gymnastics to make this one work, but I mean, this, I guess, staff. Have you all heard what we're at least trying to get to, and maybe our council can help us understand what we can and can't do, and then come back to a meeting of maybe some other options and stuff.
Could I, Andy, would you mind jumping up for just 1 second? I've actually sitting on the board with you, and I'm wondering, could you elaborate, looking at this overall? How does this type of approach, if we acquire these 2 units, how does that fit in with the housing authority's mission, goals, and strategies?
Well, I think that this proposal is actually a fair proposal for the most part. I think the units are much improved on the 3 units that were initially proposed in our earlier conversations. And the fee in lieu is just, it's difficult to work with that money and create new units. I think we are aware of the cost of building out here and just the difficulty of producing new units here. And so I think when I think of these 2 units, I also think of the potential not only for 140 to 160 at my person to purchase them, but for somebody to purchase them and use them as a second home or something like that. It really be more directly taken out of the housing market. So this does produce an opportunity for people living or living and working in this area to really be able to set roots in Mount Crested View and not in another community. And I think it's really hard to put a value on that versus investing in something in CD South or part of down Valley. But I do believe that in this area, a great example is that we have a home that is just put for sale on Teal Cali in Crested View, single family home that's a deeper unit. And in the first day we had, I think, 55 inquiries to the purchase of that unit, and it was a 120 or under AMI unit. So that really, I think, showed us how extreme the desire is for home ownership in this North Valley. And I think that's something that again should be considered looking at this. Again, with the fee in lieu versus the cost, I think I'd love to work with y'all on finding the good middle ground for helping with those assessments and some of the potential costs over time.
But, you know, I think that Mason did a great job putting this together and really paid attention to our costs, and the analysis that he put together was pretty fair, but, you know, there are some considerations that we have to make over creating new housing, over the bedroom count, over, some of those things. So I do generally think that it's generally fair. And again, this is a three-phase development where there's more opportunities to continue to maybe improve alternatives down the road, where there are maybe there's some give and take over how some of that money could go towards constructing new units in one of the newer phases. So maybe this is a net area right here where we can kind of come to an agreement with some assumptions over the future that we want to see some new building coming down the road. So that answer your question?
But it does, yeah, I just, your perspective is incredibly valuable in this conversation, so I just wanted to.
Yeah.
That counts well. Just side note, I'm looking at both these units, on Zillow, just to get a gauge. I would encourage everybody to take a look at them. For me personally, they do meet a quality standard that I think is reasonable. I'm going off of like the floors and stuff, right? Without getting into appliances, I love to, but at the end of the day, they meet a quality standard where it doesn't look like the ceiling was falling. I think they probably do. And so, you know, with that in mind, in lieu of just really bums me out. It's such a bummer.
Yeah.
So I would hate to go down that road and lose an opportunity. And one of the points I think that really resonates with me, that Andy made is simply that those could end up as second homeowner condos. And we really then didn't get a deed restricted build, and we lost 2 potential units into the market. That I do prioritize that a little bit more than the fresh build. I prefer in all cases a fresh build, but we also know that building costs and cost per square foot and real estate and other factors in that equation can be really prohibitive to that. So with that in mind, I do believe I'm in support of the acquisition of these 2 units, barring an opportunity to identify over the coming weeks, other opportunities that could be presented and discussed as we, you know, best parties. But I can get behind this.
I'll just speak to myself with maybe the direction that I would be looking for, what we can and can't do with our deed restrictions. Exploring the idea of recouping one of these units at market rate and then managing them as a deed restricted unit in good faith, which brings up our AMI calculations. Having this team go back and discuss that option and somehow future proofing, at least in the near future, any HOA anomalies or disproportionate rises in dues for somebody living there and trying to build in some sort of protection for that. So I'm kind of at the end of where I am on that, and that would be a pretty comfortable thing for me to consume and go.
I just, yeah, I understand what everyone's saying, and thank you, Andy. Carlos, how much is in our affordable housing fund? Couple million?
I think just under 2,
Yeah.
I think.
And,
1.7.
you know, payment due plus an injection from our affordable housing gets, you know, if it's on that cost, I mean, that's why we're letting affordable housing money, right?
Are there commitments to that cash already?
Technically, no, but I think the focus for that should be homestead. Yeah. So,
And we don't have any developments. coming out of our-
Right, no, but just by saying that you can't do anything with, and then including this kind of, yeah.
You know,
If we look at 180,000, yeah, you can't do it in 180, but if we subsidize that and double it with our affordable housing fund, then you can make that something.
I meant that they weren't gonna build something, they were gonna give us a check, and we don't exactly have idle projects in front of us.
Understood.
That was actually
What I was saying, yeah.
Yes, sir, please step up to the.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So Roman, your question, is that something that we donate those to the city or you guys?
I didn't know, it's just the one.
So we give it to the city, or we could purchase it, because I thought you just said something that you buy at a market rate. What was the?
Well,
What's the
just trying to figure out
execution
the
of that?
cost difference between what you would be able to sell them to under deed restriction and what gifting them to the town at market rate would be. And if that makes the gap up, we can manage it in a way that kind of honors Michael's concerns about that AMI rule when it gets lost in the breeze. And that would be the consideration.
Is there a path forward in donating them to a local nonprofit and then having them manage and execute?
Well, the concern would be if they're being held by a deed restriction that leaves that AMI level in the breeze that Mike is concerned about. That would be my concern. Because we have a method of who we rent to and why.
Right,
you know,
that deed restriction would still be in place, but they would have to be deed restricted as part of the acquisition.
Unless they would manage them in a way that honors a deed restriction, but they're not by word.
Yeah, just so you know, we, the town has 3 properties that it owns, 3 residential properties that it's owned. None of them are deed restricted, but we manage them as though they are. So for instance, in one of our properties, we have say an essential services worker. And so it is, to them, it's as though it's a deed restricted unit. The rent and all that is proportionate to what it would be if it was deed restricted. So that's kind of what Roman's talking about.
We rent it below market rate.
Yeah.
Well, we rented, it's just internal policy for these units is that you have to be an employee in the valley. The rent is capped within rent limits set for those specific, price ranges. I think that's basically the 2 primary, we're probably missing one, but that's just the policy. The properties themselves are not encumbered by the deed restriction or by a deed.
Yeah, so unless somebody else has more, it seems like we're not gonna get to a motion.
Well, to finish that thought, but I do want to add something. Sorry, I didn't know that. But to what Roman said, and maybe this is where you were going with it, I think what we can do as staff is work together amongst ourselves, including Jerry and with the applicant, and based on the feedback and input we've gotten from tonight, come back to the council with kind of the options, what are the limitations under the code that you can do? What are the what you can do within the code based on everything we've heard tonight? I think we can work together amongst ourselves and with the applicant to try and give you that information that so you're better informed and better equipped to make the appropriate decision.
And so that is where I was going. And so I want to thank you all for the creative proposal. I want to thank you for thinking of like the core goals of housing first instead of just writing that check. And so very much appreciate that. Also understand that you are on a short time frame. And so I don't want to commit staff to a deadline. But is this something we can bring back in 2 weeks?
I want to be non-committal towards that, and I'm not my department that's working on it, so I probably couldn't be speaking to it. But I think what I could say is that we would do our best to get it.
So it seems like the part we're negotiating over is it seems like most of the groundwork has been done, and so we're really negotiating over smaller pieces of it, and so that's why I was hoping maybe it could be on a shorter time frame.
And he can, but you can better answer that.
Well, I would like to see if I could get the council to help us a bit more. So from my mind, it sounds like for the proposal that to get the questions answered would be for these 2 units. Right, as part of it, and with that, maybe some options for the gifting or options with the special assessment payment.
Yeah, those are the 2 main ones that I heard.
But so it includes these units, not, okay, so this plan, but somewhere in the middle from where they are and then kind of gifting them both type of thing.
I'll clarify, but I also want to tack on an extra effort to look for other units that maybe satisfy Michael's general concerns. Agreed, if you guys, and again, we're working with your timeframe and understanding that you want to do this as soon as possible, but if working off of this current proposal and the 2 units that are proposed and trying to negotiate the smaller parts that we're talking about, if you think that, you know, an entirely different, you mentioned the property in CD South, if you think that that's the right route and that fits with your schedule, then by all means, I'm just trying to work with what you've done.
One thing, point of clarification. So Todd was quoting a section of the code that says acquisition of existing units is a method of satisfying community housing requirements. And in that whole subsection, there is no provisions of where they need to be located. But in another section, there says alternative offsite, well, it says it's preferred that community housing be provided on the same site that trigger the requirements for the development. Alternative offsite locations within Mount CD may be allowed. So you can either infer if you wanted to take it loosely or take it, you know, literally, and I would probably lean to the ladder there.
Okay, that's different than what we were.
Yes, they have to be in Mount CD.
Yeah, so Todd, to answer your question, and I can maybe send this to you later, but great, it would be. One of those units, I think it was, I don't remember which one, would be restricted and sold at their ability. The other one would not be restricted, given back to the town, and there'd be some sort of protections financially put in place with both of those units somehow to respectful way to pay for it.
Okay. I think I understand that.
Well, at the same time, looking for units that helps out.
Just a clarification for me personally. This only deals with the first phase. They'll be back on, you know, with phase 2 with different properties or, you know, a different proposal. So there isn't anything that precludes at some point in the future, you actually building real houses. This is just to get them started down the road. Is there a reasonable expectation that we can have that in phase 2 and 3 that you would actually be building the, given that's our preference, that you would actually be building and not going down the same path in the future for phase 2 and 3?
Again, that was our initial preference, was to build, and it was just a matter of availability, you know, of affordable land, you know, to be able to.
Good luck with that.
And so, as we get down the road, we definitely would be open to building if everything works, you know. And again, so many unknowns of that. It's hard to say hard and fast. Yes, I'll do that. You know,
I'd like you to say that.
This project, we don't make money until phase 3. So it's like one big, I gotta build a $3 million retaining wall at the bottom of the hill and then fix all the retaining wall at the top of the hill. And then go in and redo all of the shotcrete and, you know, so there's so much stuff that we have to go in and repair. But what's been done in the past to even get it to that place. And so it's a pretty significant, you know, I don't have financial partners and it's a pretty significant investment for us and our family. And so it's not something, I'm not a, you know, real estate investment company. We're doing this to help make people's lives better and Christian. And that's how we want to use, you know, what impressive.
It'd go a long way if you would acknowledge that you're trying to make the life better for people in Mount Crescent View instead of Crescent View.
Mount Crescent.
Yes. Going to bring up one point, that's one thing, when the ballot measure came up for the excise tax that we passed. One of the big pushes with those funds was to be deliberately worded ballot, which all of us collectively at that time supported, so that we could partner on projects outside of our town limits. Since at that time, I believe everybody thought that the North Valley really works as an entity relative to the challenges of housing and the labor shortages. So to me, this kind of falls under that same intended umbrella.
I understand.
Okay.
I couldn't resist the temptation.
You got it, you got it.
We are not.
Not Crestview, not Crestview.
So, so again, we understand that there's the deed in lieu, you all could write that check, get started tomorrow. And what you've proposed is sort of the other bookend of that. It seems like we're fairly close. And could we take a little bit more time and have some more back and forth between you all and our town staff and see if we can't come to something that's agreeable to both of us?
Yeah, I mean,
I really do
if
think, I really do think we're close.
we can get on, in 2 weeks, you know, we can get on, the agenda. I think it would be helpful for us to get some clarification of prioritization, you know, of the goals in, you know, as you assess this, not just for us, but even going forward, you know, again, this is not a, we didn't come in and buy a large parcel of land, and this is the project we've been working on for years, trying to come in and get all the entitlements. And so we were handed, you know, this PUD, and we've had very interesting planning commission meetings because we're under a PUD that, you know, requires a wood shade roof. And everybody's like, oh, no, we don't want the wood shade roof. And so there's a lot of lack of clarity in trying to figure out that path forward. And so I'm trying to kind of take away subjectivity and get to an objective. This is what we want. Here's prioritization. And we recognize that some are gives and some are takes, but if it's, you know, if number one is to not take real estate off the market that people that are in this, you know, financial spectrum can afford, then that kind of mixes up how we address it.
Well, and again, I agree 100% with Michael that our preference is new builds. But again, we have to realize.
You'd like to get donated to us?
Well, again, so let me finish the thought, because we obviously bump up against the payment in lieu. And so, again, you guys can write the payment in lieu check and be done with all this.
And that's not our desire.
And again, I very much appreciate that, and that's what I'm saying. I think we're fairly close, even with the proposal you have. I know we've thrown other things in the mix. And I understand why that might lead to more lack of clarity for you, but it does seem like we're really close on what you have proposed. And maybe some of the suggestions of Councilor Collegier could get us there. I mean, we might be talking about $100,000.
A quick question, if you don't mind. Given the obvious preference for new build and the timeline that we've been on, and we did vet out that opportunity, if that was something that we would want to move forward with, and it was a finding land acquisition timeline, having this plan fully put together, what's going to be built, to have that to you by permit phase one would have been a substantial hurdle. Would the council be open to a deferral of the phase one requirement to accommodate for us being able to potentially put together a plan in conjunction with you guys for a new build that would encompass not only phase one, but phase two and phase three?
Michael, start it on. Let's say you.
Come on,
really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
So what do you think? What do you think?
Well, I don't even know if I put the end up, sorry.
Anything, can you repeat that?
The last part, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Would the council be open to considering a deferral of the phase one requirement to accommodate for us to fully vet out, plan, acquire, and build towards a solution that accomplishes the offsite build solution?
So that's, that was actually something I thought about a half an hour ago. And that in addition to what Dwayne was whispering in my ear while you were talking, you know, which was, you know, assistance with land acquisition from perhaps our affordable housing fund, could provide, a really nice opportunity for additional housing, not necessarily. So I would want to consider that.
Mason, I love where your head's at. Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, I thought you were.
That's okay.
Mason, I love where your head's at. I'm curious, would you be open to a similar approach? But seeing as how cash flow is not really gonna open up until phase 3, would you be open to acquiring these 2 units now? We defer acquisitions during phase 2 and 3, and then we build new in phase 4. And the deed restrictions and completion of that would need to be completed before COs could be issued for the final phase.
There's 3 phases.
Oh, 3. Oh, shoot, sorry, I don't know about that. 4. Okay, cool. Well, that makes it more challenging then, so. Please.
I would just say our goal coming in, preferably the next meeting would be to provide that clarity for both. This side of the table and this side of the table. So we know what really can be done. I think that's what we can provide. Because I think that's what's been expressed. It is a little, just provide that extra clarity on what we can do, what are the limitations we can do, and by we, I mean us as the town. And also have that be known to them. And then once that clarity is provided, we can really get to the nitty gritty of the discussion of what can be done. I think that can be the goal for the next meeting if you do decide to continue.
Yeah, and one of the smaller pieces of information was the, just how healthy that HOA is. That's still an outstanding question, right? What the reserves are and things like that. There was someone who mentioned they thought it was good, but it would be good to get verification of that.
I would,
Especially if we're considering these 2 units, in a revised proposal.
I would put that in the court of the applicant, and if they can obtain that.
Yeah, sure.
The sale of some units has been stalled because of the lack of reserves because
In that building.
in that area. Yes.
Okay.
So that's a majorly important piece, and I think the HOA audit component is pretty essential.
Should be easy, relatively easy to get.
Okay.
The direction I'm in is, and this is, I guess, this guidance for staff. Given, you know, their willingness to build new, I think that and Michael really brought it up, and I just like to emphasize it, that and maybe the best thing for us to do would be to partner with them to buy land that they could build on and, you know, work together, you know, to identify a suitable location and to buy land and build new. That's my.
One idea. You're, I think, sort of at the point, if I may. Sorry, I'm not in the room. But I think you're sort of at the point of not being able to, you know, spend more time sort of crafting alternatives. But I think the staff and I think the applicant really now have a good understanding of the things the council's interested in and the things that might work for council. And there's kind of almost a buffet of components that I think if the staff and the developer can work together, they can assemble a couple of different salads. Not to mix metaphors too much, but you know, I got this buffet of little things, which when put together will equal 2 or 3 different alternatives. And I'm thinking that maybe what you really want from the applicant and the staff for next time is, okay, here's 3 packages that have been figured out so that we don't have to like adjust a number halfway through a meeting. These are 3 packages that have been figured out. The developer will agree to do one of these. And council, let's talk about which of those you would prefer, given their components. But that way you don't have to be in the position of saying, well, developer, what about this? And understandably, their response is, sounds okay, but we have to think of, then you never kind of get there. And I can understand why the applicant isn't gonna right tonight say, yes, we will build new units in phase 3. And I'm gonna commit to that tonight. And no way that you can or should do that. But it may well be, and I'll shut up in a sec, but it may well be that you're at the point to direct staff to work with the applicant to bring alternatives that the applicant will agree to do so that council can evaluate those in the next meeting and pick one.
Are you all willing to do that?
Yeah, I think, as you said, Mayor Kippen, that we're close, kind of figuring it out. I think again, that the part, there's in the back of my mind, it's like, just write a check and be done with it, get going. And again, that's not what any of us want. Yet my ability to get going is all based on this conversation and us trying to figure out what's best, not in the short term, but in the longer term. And so if this decision, because again, we're showing a good faith effort to try to work with council to come up with something that achieves the goal of Mount Crescent Youth in the community. But allow Todd's, group to allow us to get going on the building permit. And really the biggest thing that we have to go start focusing on is building these lower tiered retaining walls. And it's just gonna take, once it starts snowing, then we gotta be done. And we've got to get these foundations poured on these first 4 units that our goal was originally is to have 4 buildings right in by December. It's not gonna happen. So build the lower retaining walls, 3 foundations below, build one foundation up top. And start building on that upper unit so people see, movement, things going vertical. But again, to expedite that and for us to accomplish our timeline, the easiest thing is to write a check. Yet that's not what any of us want. And so the time constraint for us to make the best decision works against the best financial decision for the project. And so can we move forward? Showing that we continue to have a willingness, to work with staff and council to come up with the best short-term, medium, and long-term solutions.
Nick?
Yes.
We've got the deed restrictions connected to the framing inspections, correct?
Well,
Right now, I just feel like we're so close and we are about to let the bureaucracy of things slow this down and potentially jeopardize an awesome opportunity and good faith on everybody's part. So is there a way, what can we do right now that would, or let me rephrase it, is there anything that could be done to allow some of the work on the retaining walls to be done while this final piece is completed?
Well, we don't like to, we would like, we have a history of starting projects that didn't finish in this town, right? And we're looking at one of them right now. So we prefer
Other owners, previous.
other owners, yes. Yes,
You
sorry
always get
about
all
that.
this points for picking up an old project, right?
Yeah, so we prefer to have the entire project ready, and so a building permit can be issued. And if it is the policy is to have, as part of the building permit, to have the community housing wrapped up. And if it comes to, if that's the final thing, and it's kind of in your hands, I don't know if that would be, I mean, if you're asking like, then we issue the building permit, I don't have the answer to that. If that's the only thing remaining so that they can start the project is an approved community housing plan, I think that is above me to answer that.
I would say we're talking 2 weeks.
My only concern was, and historically, having seen kind of sometimes how things meander, that could be 6 to 8 or something if we don't come to a final decision.
Well, we want what's best for the town, so we should take the time that's necessary to achieve that.
Okay, cool.
That would be my That's not really answering your question, though. Could we do something? I mean, maybe we could issue the building permit and they could pay the payment in lieu for that building permit. So we have that already in place. And then as we work through these negotiations, refund that back if we reach an amicable solution. But
I'm only asking.
their motivation might wane once they already have the permit in place. There's a lot of things,
It's
I don't
three
mean-
phases.
Yeah, but there's no guarantee 2 and 3 are going to happen.
Right.
Or they're gonna happen within the next 20 years. I've been down this road many times with developers, and this is not an indictment on you at all. It's just the nature of how things work.
Yeah.
Have worked here is all.
Run, and then we're gonna
I
wrap
think
it up.
we've heard each other, I think the applicants heard us, staff's heard us, and channel my inner Jerry. The sooner we move to our next agenda, item, the sooner the meeting's over, the sooner staff can be honest.
So again, I'll just ask one more time, are you all willing to work for 2 more weeks on this? Okay.
Thank you. Will we have a decision in 2 weeks?
Yes.
Yes.
Again, talk about that.
Well, I think to answer your question, you'll have a decision in 2 weeks because you'll either know whether this is gonna work out or you're gonna write that check or make it.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
And I'm available to any of you guys, if you want to, Nathan at honeyrockgroup.com, or you can text me on my cell phone, I'll call you. But we want to make ourselves available, to find a solution that works for everybody. In Preston. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all.
If we're gonna continue, we probably should motion to
I move to table,
continue.
continue, 9.1 community housing plan for Honey Rock Ridge development to the next scheduled meeting. Second.
A motion for myself and a second from Roman to continue this discussion on community housing plan for Honey Rock Ridge to the next meeting. Any further discussion?
Roman,
Yes.
Janet, Steve.
Yep.
Wayne. Michael. Mayor Kimpton.
Yes. Next item is appointment of a town councilor to serve on the Homestead RFP contractor review and selection committee. Carlos.
I think my summary in the staff report pretty much lays it out. We're in the middle of the RFP process for Homestead. The applications are due, or the submittals are due this Friday. We anticipate some responses. They're probably gonna be somewhat, if I were to guess, somewhat creative. There's some gaps we have to fill here. And so while this is not necessary, it doesn't have to be this way. You could decide not to appoint a counselor. But if you would like to have a counselor be part of that review of the proposals, part of the interviews, part of the recommendation to council for the selection. I just wanted to throw that offer out there. I think the committee is made up, will be staff. Andy will be part of that. Williford LLC is gonna be part of that. Am I missing anybody?
Good job. Staff.
Yeah, other staff members. So, just for your consideration, if anybody wants or is interested in serving in that capacity.
What do y'all think? Let's start first. We think it's a good idea to have a counselor on the committee. Yeah, you disagree with that? Okay, then let's hear it. Anybody interested or? You're interested or you have something to say?
No, I mean, throwing my hat in the
Okay.
ring that I will participate in that process.
Okay. Anybody else interested? All right, do we want 1 or 2?
I like 2 personally.
Too many cooks on that guy. Oh, wait, there's really. I don't necessarily believe it'll help the process, so I will concede my position.
I like the collaboration version, more is better in my way of thinking, so
other insight based on your. Yeah, this is the life. Critical thinking. Yeah, and I think that could bring value to the conversation.
I would say, you know, on my behalf, I've been construction superintendent and been putting together projects of this scale and knowing to do it, so it's a kind of healthy, so what I'm looking at.
Well, then maybe we can both bring something.
I would like both of us to be on.
There you go.
There you go. Carlos,
I don't think there's anything that
Do you
we're
have
gonna do.
recommendation yet?
If once we get above 2, then we're.
yep, we don't have any.
Public meetings,
Yep, so we should be all good.
Move to appoint, Dwayne and Steve to the RFP, submittal review task force.
We have a motion from Roman and a second from Janet to appoint Steve and Dwayne to the RFP contractor review and selection committee. Any further discussion?
Michael.
Yep.
Dwayne,
Yes.
Janet, Roman,
Yes.
Steve.
Yep.
Mayor Kimball.
Yes. Next is item 9.3, and since I don't have an official title, I'm gonna call it the shredded contract.
Yes, let me get there real quick. So this is it's very simple, straightforward contract with, and Tiffany, you can help me out here with Shredded. It's basically the company we use to shred our, or to dispose of our shredded confidential materials. How we use them regularly. The program is now subsidized by the state and they offer a discounted program for government organizations at a rate of about 30 or not at about $30 per month, which equates to $360 per year. Historical data from the last couple years, it was $436 in 2023, $849 in 2022, almost 1,000 in 2021. So it just makes sense for us to order this agreement and we would realize some savings by doing it. I know Emily in finance and Tiffany as the clerk are eager or would be eager to get this in place now. So that's why we've added it to the agenda. And so I would just ask for authorization to sign the agreement.
I move to approve the council manager powers to allow them to sign the standard agreement with Shredder to recycle for monthly document shredding services.
A motion from Janet and a second from Steve to approve the shredded contract. Any further discussion?
Steve.
Yep.
Roman,
Yes.
Janet,
Yes.
Dwayne,
Yes.
Michael.
Yep.
Mayor Kimball.
Yes. Next is reports, discussion items and announcement, and first among those is town manager's report.
Yes, the only thing I have to add to my manager's report is, I don't know if you can see it real well out there, but if you look at the pickleball courts, there's supposed to be hopefully done tomorrow, weather permitting, just lacking the white outlines for the courts on the pickleball courts, so whether for better or for worse, if they're cooperative with us, so
Feel that energy.
hopefully tomorrow we'll still have to put up the nets and some fencing and stuff, but that shouldn't take us too terribly long, so conservatively, we're saying by the end of the week.
Awesome.
Town picnic's Friday.
Do we have a ribbon cutting, you know?
We're talking about that. We probably will do something, but we need to coordinate that with everybody, events, parks and everything. And we will do something, but there's a possibility that we'll delay it till opening of the park of next year to do some kind of, we might do a soft opening and something a little more festive.
We should call Shay.
Shay was first on the list. She's been key as heading up the kind of the pickleball group of, providing insight for forth. So yeah, she's definitely on the list. Anybody would be invited, of course. And we'll notice it one way or another, but there will be something, we're just not sure what.
I noticed there's no finance report, June sales numbers.
We can have them for next, I don't know if they're in or not yet, actually, but if they are, we can have them for next month or next meeting.
June is due July 20th. So by the time they filter all in and then we get them entered, it's gonna be tight to be August.
We haven't seen a finance report. September in a while.
In a little bit.
Yes.
It'd be nice, yeah, I'd love to see.
Yeah, we've talked about that. I want finance to have a report every month. That's the expectation.
Well, that meeting I asked about the finance numbers for June, and I was told next meeting. Yeah. Now you said maybe not August, this is starting to feel like.
Yeah, I'll have that conversation again. And what we will do in September as well, which I already mentioned to you, is kind of do a 6-month budget, assess where we are for the first 6 months on that speed and criminal. For me, getting more acquainted with that and also as we move into budget cycle. But I hear you loud and clear. It is my expectation for a finance report is part every month, just like every other department. Even if the numbers are not ready, it's not just numbers, either finance department works on multiple other things other than just crunching sales tax and whatnot. So there should be a report in every packet. Or not every packet, every other packet.
Monthly.
Yes.
I had a question for Tiffany, we're not to hers.
Oh, I thought we were on, we talked about the finance report.
We're still on town managers. Oh, I'm sorry. So just simply say. Anybody else have questions for Carlos on his support or questions for Harry? Okay, next is clerk support discussion items.
2 things. There is a opening on the planning commission. Anyone that wants to start serving, it's a short opening. We have a counselor who's leaving, our planning commission who's leaving, so it's only from now until April 2024. So if you know anyone that's interested, contact the building department, they can give you a rundown on more of that position. And then we have hit $35,000 in e-bike rebates as of today.
How many individual so
I'm into the 60 number. So I will be probably at our next meeting asking if you guys want to cap it at 50 or increase it. Just a heads up on that.
Thank you for bringing that up. I think we talked about hopefully seeing the breakdown in our packets at some point or more regularly starting with who what bikes are being purchased. We're trying to like online, local purchases.
And that's what I did last meeting.
Right.
Do you want that
I mean,
bi-weekly?
is it a big lift to just pop the updated numbers in your report?
Well, I was gonna definitely do it at the next meeting. My question is, do you want it more frequent than once a month?
If you're not going to submit a report, I don't suppose it's a critical thing, but yeah, if you're submitting a report, it'd be nice to finish.
And I believe I covered all that in my last report, so if there's anything else you want me to add to it, just let me know.
And then regarding the minutes, I know over the years, we've gone back and forth about some things, and this is more of just a massaging and sort of inquiry for you. When I read through the minutes, for example, my place was just a little bit more clarity on maybe who was indicating something. For example, 7.4 on the July 11th meeting. It's coming off as a sort of a statement of fact, and I'm wondering who was saying certain things. You know, option 3 self-serving. It's just kind of nice to track where those opinions are coming from. I have another example, and I'll ask you to just respond from your perspective on
Well, as a whole, I've gotten away from listening, this counselor said this counselor said that, I've gotten away from this much detail. When it's more of a hot topic item, I have been including just discussion points. Council, do you want me to start, do you want me to start listing who says what? Do you want me to keep track of that? We could also go to action minutes, which a lot of towns do because it's less liability in general. But with action minutes, all you get is the agenda item, the motion, and the vote. So what does the majority of council want with their minutes?
I would, before we get to that, I would ask, Jerry, do you have any input? I mean, I know, as Tiffany mentioned, there is sort of a liability component with minutes. Do you have any best practices, suggestions, or anything like that?
Yeah, this comes up in every city and there's kind of there's a range. And it's a little bit a matter of style. I'll say that, the one thing to remember is minutes aren't a transcript. And so it's fair for the clerk to carve back from that. And the style that Tiffany's been just articulated is perfectly acceptable. Ultimately, you have a recording, which is the record if you want to have all the detail. I'm not really worried about liability unless something's really misrepresented in the minutes. I'm taking too long to say it's a matter of style, and it really is something that the council needs to say, this is what we want to be able to see so that we can accurately, the next meeting, remember what happened. But it is difficult for a clerk, especially for a long discussion, to identify who said what each time. There's a major step between that and the whatever it is that's less detailed than that. And when you get to who said this person said this and that person said that, you're really becoming part of you're treading into transcript territory, and that's an enormous amount of work.
Yeah, and let me be clear, I'm not asking for a transcript in the meeting minutes, but just when something's so out of context, I don't know why it's in there because I can't apply it to the conversation that occurred, then maybe it just shouldn't be in there. That's all. And I'm just trying to find a happy medium of something that's notated, but doesn't make sense, at least to me. What it's referring to. And perhaps that's my own.
You do have one, and I realize it's not the best remedy, but that's why you have approval of minutes. And I've seen many places where a council member will ask to have the minutes from the last meeting taken off the consent calendar so they can be voted on separately. In fact, I've got one council that's kind of regularly does this, and there's a couple of council members that will say, okay, on the agenda item number 9.2, I'd like it to be made clear that council member X, made that statement or had that point. Now, that's a case by case after the fact fix, but I think it works to solve the problem sometimes, and it's a fix that's doesn't require Tiffany to change her whole approach all the time. And it's kind of available for the occasional, I'd like a little more clarity here. I think it was me who said this. And okay, fine, you take a motion. This council I work with takes a motion to approve the minutes as revised, and then you're off to the races, you're done. And you don't have to really change the protocol much.
Well, Tiffany, you always take that on, and if there's a particular agenda item that I can't put the pieces together, maybe in the room in that moment, we can figure that out, and then it's just gonna be slightly amended rather than changing your style.
And there's times when you guys have questioned things and I've said, let me go back and listen to the recording. And I do that, and then based on what I heard on the recording, I either revise or don't revise the minutes, and we talk about it, and I've definitely done that pretty well.
I think it's a happy meeting, so it doesn't change your style or anything. Thanks.
All right. Any other questions for Tiffany?
All right, next is town council reports, and discussion items, since Roman submitted a report, we'll start with him, and anybody else that has it can go after Roman.
I'll just add, just to clarify from my earlier statement, I'm gonna be out of town every Wednesday afternoon, it's probably Saturday, so unfortunately I'll be missing the town picnic and Jan's generous offerings, so, sorry.
I have one question.
Yeah.
How did you guys come to the position to utilize van service in North Valley without time? I'm ready to roll. Anybody else?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, no, now's the time for other council reports.
You can ask me.
no, this is about,
Okay.
not.
So we're still on Roman, so.
Yeah, we're still on,
Sorry.
yeah, it's all right. I attended the last board meeting and I missed, that we were stopping service for Paradise Road. How did that decision get made? And I'm asking you as chairman of the board, somehow I missed that whole.
Would like me to remember the meeting for you that you were at?
Yes, I do.
I'm sorry. Pay attention next time. You can't remember the conversation or you can't remember voting or.
Not about, discontinuing the bus route around Paradise. I totally missed that.
I don't know how to respond to that.
Okay, so.
You were at the meeting that you
Yeah,
voted
I
on.
was.
The
so-
agenda item. Okay.
That's a fair thing to say.
Sure.
Some people forget things sometimes.
Clearly.
Asking for some
It wasn't
clarification.
clear.
So you want to have.
Everyone, stop. This is, thank you all very much for your public comment, but this is not the way it works at this point in the
Okay.
meeting.
Sorry.
This is the end of the meeting when we're doing council reports, so that agenda item is passed. Since we're talking about it now, I can tell you that this will be an agenda item in the very near future, and this will all get hashed out, and you will all be able to say the things that you want to say, and Jeremy from Mountain Express will come here, and we were gonna have a group discussion about it, and we were gonna work it all out, but now is not the time for that.
Thank you.
That's for the future. Okay?
Thank you, and I'm sorry.
So for you gentlemen, unless there's a question about this specific report, I realize you have some other business, but the report is pretty narrow. And so if there's no questions about that, then I think we're done with this agenda item. And so now we're on to Janet. Janet, what's your council report?
Well, I guess it's sort of a report. I didn't hear any changes back from anybody on the evaluation form, so I will get an email with the evaluation forms to fill out and get back to me by Sunday, August 20th. And then I will be putting it together for us to discuss with Carlos at the first meeting in September.
I did send you mine back. There was some.
Other word changes?
Yep, in
Okay.
one of them there was some strike throughs because of the relevance of the question, because of the lack of a full second from Carlos. And then there were,
Okay, I'll look at that.
several other ones
Look at
that.
that and make
mentioned
changes,
that we should
send it out.
Be working on that, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you very much, Janet. Any other council reports? I have a real quick one. It was very last minute and, spur of the moment, but I had a pretty amazing opportunity to go spend some time with Senator Bennett, yesterday. So I got to go for a hike at Lost Lake with Senator Bennett and got to talk to him about problems and issues we're dealing with here in Mount Crested Butte. The reason for the meeting was all the work that Senator Bennett and his staff and a whole working group is doing on public lands to preserve some additional public lands. And so that was the gist of it. But for me, the big take home and the wonderful part of it was getting to spend a little time with him and have him hear about what we're dealing with as a very small town, and maybe not one that, we're not Denver or Colorado Springs. And so just wanted to let you know that I kind of banged the drum for our town and had a pretty good reception and a very receptive staff. I had similar conversations with all of his staff, members of his staff. about what we're dealing with here in our town. And so a wonderful outreach from the senator and hopefully one that I've made the most of on behalf of our town. So I let you guys know about that.
I know it's a state issue, but did any of the state's agenda with Mountain Town and the rezoning stuff come up?
So, yeah, so again, the reason for this gathering was this legislation that Senator Bennett's gonna introduce that is, again, protecting some additional public lands here in our area. But we did have a bit of a laugh about that, only in the sense that, you know, it went over like a lead balloon and that was noticed even by, folks nationally.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Move to adjourn.
Second. Let's adjourn. Thanks, everyone, for coming tonight.
See you in 2 weeks.